Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everybody. So if you have a vehicle, your car, whatever it might be, many states require you to get an annual inspection. How does that look when it's a commercial vehicle? How does that look when it's a large rig carrying lots of cargo, potentially a tanker? We're going to talk about that today. Look a little bit deeper into the annual vehicle inspections that commercial motor vehicles are required to have each year. And that's just a part of what he helps companies with, these motor carriers, to make sure that they're on point and safe on our roadways. He's the founder of DOT Training Solutions. Matt Freeman is back with us. Hey, Matt, how you doing?
Hey, doing well. Thanks, Steve, for having me back. This has been a lot of fun here doing this.
Yeah, learned a lot along the way. And this whole, well, let me, even before I start here, the motor vehicle inspections for even passenger vehicles, is that every state requiring it every year, or it actually really varies?
No, it is every state. It's a federal regulation. So all
Gotcha.
commercial motor vehicles are required to have this annual inspection. Buses, anything over 10,001 pounds that meets the definition of a commercial motor vehicle. And you got all your non-commercial vehicles that are non-CDL, and you got all your CDL vehicles that, required, all commercial motor vehicles. So,
passenger vehicles, just out of curiosity, is that every year as well?
yes, every year, all commercial vehicles. Yep.
Is that just out of curiosity, because every year you got to plunk down that cash to get that inspection.
Right.
And you can't get insurance. Let's say if your insurance has lapsed, you have to have it inspected before you can do your insurance. Is it a federal for passenger vehicles? Is that on a statewide thing, or is that also federal?
It's also federal.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Any vehicle that meets the definition of a commercial motor vehicle. Okay. So I'll break down to keep it real simple. Anything operating in interstate commerce. Okay. Or whatever the state has deemed to be a commercial motor vehicle. Okay. So if it's interstate commerce, by definition, is for a commercial motor vehicle is anything that's gross vehicle weight rating over 10,001 pounds or greater. Okay. And that's your non-CDL commercial vehicles. And then any commercial motor vehicle, 26,001 or greater, meets that definition, as well. So, any trucking company, any bus company, private or even for hire, depending on what the state has adopted for their regulations. But if you're in interstate commerce, they all have to have an annual vehicle inspection.
So let's jump down that inspection rabbit hole. When this is being done, well, first of all, who is doing the inspecting? Obviously, if you have a passenger vehicle, you go to a local service shop and they do the emissions and the brakes and the lights and all that. Who's doing the inspecting on these vehicles?
Anybody who works on commercial motor vehicles. And what I mean is like any of your maintenance shops that work on your big rigs.
Okay.
Any shops that work on your everyday buses. They're going to be able to do that. Okay. So there is a requirement that in the regulations that require for brakes and for vehicle inspections that they have to meet a minimum requirement. Okay. And the requirement is in 49 CFR Part 396 is where you're going to find that at. And those requirements, you are required to keep a form, inspection form, to show the qualifications, which basically it comes down to you got to meet a minimum of 1 year experience, say going to a tech school, okay, 1 year's experience working with, in the area of mechanics, on engines, trucks, doing inspections, and it's crazy as it sounds, is some of these folks, grow up working on, with their grandparents, their, friends, family on their vehicles. They may have family that drives trucks and they work with them. That meets the experience. They just got to show 1 year of experience. Now, with that said, for qualifications, they have to sign that form. So anybody who has a, let's just say, a maintenance facility, and they work on, they have to keep a copy of one of those forms. It's a self-certification is what it is. And they have to keep a copy with their records. Because when DOT comes in, the first thing they're going to look for is how many inspectors do you have, mechanics, working on these. They're going to say, hey, do you have your qualification form filled out? And they're going to also look and see if you have your brake qualifications filled out. Same kind of form. So anytime they're working on the brakes, they have to have a form filled out showing they have the experience.
What are some of the other things that are looked at? Obviously, the obvious ones are, brakes and some of the mechanical things, but let's go deeper there in some of these big vehicles.
Yeah. So one of the key things that really kicked in the last couple of years now that's being enforced more than ever is rear end protection. And what they're looking at is rear impact guards on these trucks and trailers. Primarily your trailers where you have a cargo tank or your big box vans. So what they've done, this is the rear impact guard has always been in the regulations, but now it's being enforced more because of collisions, rear impact collisions. So now for the inspections, one of the things that they included on an annual vehicle inspection is they have to have a rear impact guard that meets the standards, and you have to have it depending on what they call wheels back. They're required to have another guard. Okay.
Wow.
So that's a big one. It impacts, and you kind of go back to the accident thing, and people go, when do I need this? When don't I need this? The wheels on the rear of a trailer have to be so far to the end of the trailer. Okay. I believe it's 12 inches that they have to be back. Okay. So what they're saying is if you have your wheels that far back, that will keep the vehicle from going underneath the truck. Okay. If your wheels are farther up, all right, you have to make sure you have that guard just to kind of keep it real simple on how it works. So one of the main requirements is that when you bring your vehicle and get inspected, it has to have a rear impact guard and it has to meet the regulation standard. Okay, it has to be stamped saying it meets the standard for impact. Okay, that's a new one that's been added to the annual vehicle inspection report.
Wow.
So you can't just go throw a 2x4 in the back and call it a bumper. They actually have to meet, the standard on which the rear impact can take. So
I would imagine there's a lot more going deeper in terms of what that device is going to be, the impact that it can take, what it's going to do, how it's going to cushion the impact, and all of that. Wow. I didn't even know that existed. So that's fairly recent.
It's always been around. It's just being enforced now on the inspection.
Okay. Wow.
Okay. You got a thick book here. I'll kind of give you an idea. You got a safety book here. You see how thick that is? So part of the safety part of the inspection process has come out of the requirements here. And that's always been in there, but because of the crashes in the last few years, they're saying now if someone had an impact guard, it prevented a person from going underneath the trailer, maybe prevented a fatality out of that. You don't know, but that's the reason behind it in the enforcement of that.
Emissions, I'm sure, is part of all of this, right?
Yes, in some states.
Really? So it's not, I would imagine that emissions would be important. I thought even in passenger vehicles, that's one of the top things that is part of the inspection. So it's not so much in commercial vehicles.
Well, they look at everything. So there's some states have stronger regulations on emissions.
Okay.
But the key things here, I'll just kind of go through a few of them to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at.
Sure.
So your key things, we talked about brakes. I say things are no-brainers, but no, it's an actual item.
Yeah.
They got to look at. You're looking at the coupling devices, depending on what they're using. Your exhaust system. So there's part of your, we're talking emissions. They do have to look at that. You can't have leaks. That's one of the things on you're doing roadside or scale houses. You'll catch those leaks real easy. And then the crazy thing is you'll get a fresh, brand new annual inspection saying, hey, your truck or your trailer is looked at. And then you go see this fresh line of where the exhaust is seeping out. It's kind of, well, makes you wonder if they really did a true inspection. Okay. So you look at the exhaust system, your fuel systems. Okay. Lighting devices, they got to have all the proper lighting devices working, safe loading. Again, you want to make sure all the securement's there for what they need. Steering mechanisms, they got to make sure everything with that steering mechanism is working. Checking the lash, of the steering wheel, make sure it's not just, you're turning and it's actually turning, suspension, you look at your frame, you're looking at wheels and tires. They all have to be in good condition. Windshields is a big one. You can have cracked windshields. You can have anything blocking the view of the driver. Again, we talked about one of the things that's also in here for motor coach. They got to make sure they're checking the seats, making sure everything is secured, for all passengers. And then there's some other things that they see anything down, they can mark, so there's kind of your basic inspection is like a 15 steps that they look at. Okay. So, and there's just different areas in each one of those steps. And then if there's anything out of the norm, they have an other section, and then they can mark that down, because obviously you want the customer to know that there's anything that they find wrong with the vehicle, even if it is in that annual inspection, that they mark it down. Because what are we looking at here? It's about safety.
Is there a difference in the inspection process and we talked a lot about cargo tanks recently. Is that also part of the inspection?
Yes. Yeah, this goes for all trucks and trailers, this inspection. So again, those trailers are cargo tanks, box vans, flatbed, trailers,
right?
Buses, all commercial motor vehicles get the same process. Now, obviously, if you're looking at when you're looking at the trailer, you're not checking a windshield. You're checking all the other components that go with it. So where you have your separation would be your truck tractor, which is your big rig, okay, and then you have your combination part of it would be the trailer. Another thing I know we talked about one day about you have a local, in the area you're at, a trucking company you noticed, and if they're box vans, if they're a straight truck, so it's a truck and kind of like your U-Hauls, style trucks, they still get a full inspection, even though the box, is connected to the truck. So,
while we're talking about inspections, to me, I always equate that to insurance. That's got it. You have to have one. You can't have one or the other. What's a typical cost of insurance? Is that easy, even just to figure out basic costs? Let's say that tanker truck that's carrying gasoline or diesel going down the road, the big one, yearly insurance on a vehicle like that. Any thoughts? Just to illustrate the magnitude of all of this.
Yeah. So your insurance is going to go start anywhere from, depending on what they're transporting. Okay. It's going to start at 750,000 minimum, all the way up to 5 million that they're required to carry.
Okay.
So when you're looking into your hazmat, you're looking at your million and 5 million. And then just your everyday freight is going to be at 750,000 a year. So that's one thing they look at when they're looking at inspections. Part of it is in insurance. You got to make sure if you're hauling a hazmat and it requires $1 million and you're carrying 750, could be an issue, or there will be an issue. So,
wow.
Yeah, it does affect. And I get a lot of times folks call me and say, "Hey, what's it going to cost me just getting into the business?" Insurance can vary. It's not like having a car or a pickup truck, or an SUV, that we drive daily. It's expensive. Some customers, are paying up into $30,000 a month. So it can, and I'm just using that as a little example.
A month for one vehicle?
For their operation.
For their operation. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a game changer in many regards.
Yeah. And so if you think about some of these companies who have multiple, trucks and trailers, and insurance don't mess around. And one thing they look at, though, is compliance and they want to see how you're doing. So when we go in and look at companies, insurance, so we'll look at that. Your ratings. We talk about ratings with Cheryl on how the ratings affect a company. So yeah, insurance has an effect on that. If you like, for instance, if you are transporting explosives, fireworks, okay, you have to have a satisfactory rating to keep a safety permit to transport explosives. If you have a bad rating, just in general, your insurance goes way up, and then now you have a chance of losing, your authority, different things depending on what operation you have. So insurance takes a big place. The inspection process takes a big place. They look at all this. And if they're getting good inspections and doing what they're supposed to be doing, insurance does look at that.
So you said, Matt, for explosives, let's say you're transporting those, that you need to have a special permit for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tell us about the different types of permits.
Okay, well, you have a safety permit, and that's granted when you have to have that when you're let's just use explosives in general. But once you start carrying more than 50 pounds of explosives, you have to have what they call a safety permit. Okay. There are certain things that the government requires permitting for, depending on what it is. Okay. Now, there's also what they call a special permit. So if you have a specific chemical and tank that you want to transport that chemical in, they go in, they look to see if they can approve a special permit for that particular tank to transport that chemical in, okay, or fuel, whatever it may be. So there's different types of permits on that side of it. Those are your key basic ones. They have what they call a safety permit, and then they have a special permit. Your special permit is going to be, like I said, a special type of tank, something you're transporting specific to, say, maybe a certain industry. Okay, you have to have that. Again, the best example to give on a safety permit would be like explosives. And there's other things that you can get them for, but that's the most common one they have to have.
Who issues those permits?
You have FMCSA, it issues the safety permits, and you have, which is Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And then in your special permits, you have PHMSA, that's Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration. Those are the ones that regulate all the 49 CFR safety regulations with the DOT that we talk about.
Tell us about your process when you work with a company. Obviously, these inspections are coming up. You got to have these permits and all of that. How do you work with them to make sure that they're taken care of properly, that they're prepared even for an inspection?
Yeah, one thing we want to make sure they're doing, they're in full compliance. In order to have your safety permits, you have to have a satisfactory rating right now. So we got to make sure they are top notch, and they can't have any violations that are going to cause that rating to change. So that's the key thing we do. Primarily on those safety permits. Again, it's our explosive companies I work with that carry explosives, which I have a handful. So we go in and we make sure they're doing their annual inspections. What we're talking about here, their yearly inspections. They're doing everything that's required as far as the paperwork goes. We want to make sure that DOT walks in, they got all their shipping papers are good to go. They're with the explosives, they have them in the right containers. The magazines have been checked. They call them magazines where they keep the explosives. Everything is in top order because, most of these companies, especially your contractors, your road builders, they can't build a road without blowing it, right? So they got to make sure they are able to keep the permits to do this. Even so, and then I have pyrotechnics customers. They do the big shows for, your ball games, your events, and if they can't keep safe running, they're out of business. And that, these guys live just a few times a year,
Wow.
to do this. So it's pretty important. And, it comes down to just making sure that they are following, what they need to. And they get checked quite a bit. On average, your hazmat companies uh, get checked every 3 years. So, it's not just one and done. You got to keep it up because they're gonna watch it a little closer.
To illustrate your point, you brought back a memory. You've heard of the Grucci fireworks family, right?
Yes.
One of the bigger ones in the country.
Hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
their plant is located where I am.
Hmm.
And
Oh, wow.
at that time, this is going back, a number of decades, but it was on a weekend afternoon. I believe it was a Saturday. And I was on the air at a radio station about, I would say like 10 miles away from where their facility is. There was an explosion.
Oh, wow.
I felt it 9, 10 miles away. Not even exaggerating. Oh yeah. Oh,
Wow.
so now put, a decent amount of that on a truck and you're transporting it. Gosh forbid something happens. Can't even imagine what that would look like on the roadway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a reason they have separation and segregation. You can't put, you don't want your explosives with your blasting caps. I mean, they have to be totally separate. You can't, there's a lot of goes with, when they're transporting for securement. You can't you don't want to stick a dynamite just rolling around, you know. It may hurt something, it may not, but you don't, there's rules in place for reasons.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. Um,
I don't even think about that. And now, yeah, that's just, there's only a few fireworks companies in the country, but then you also have some states sell fireworks, for consumer use. So
mhm,
they got to
mhm.
get there somehow to these stores like Pennsylvania. You can walk in pretty much any store and buy fireworks.
Yeah.
Uh, got to be transported, or like you said, road work. They have to blast something to move forward on, a major road job. Never even thought about what could be out there and being transported.
Yeah, and so you get your levels of your 1.4s, your different levels of fireworks. So, um, your more dangerous stuff is going to require the permits, and you have your commercial stuff where everyday folks can go to, buy a bottle rocket, a black cat, whatever they're the Roman candles, just some of
Sure.
the stuff like that. That's your lower end, but it's your pyrotechnics that shoot the higher end fireworks. So they're getting into the 13, 14, 15, 16 inch big old round,
The mortars,
mortars,
right?
yeah, that they shoot up there. Yeah. Um, I try not to get too technical with everything because everybody understands that. But that's what they are. And so when you're getting into the higher end stuff of your different powders that you're using, that's when those permits come into play. It's not just I got a package of Roman candles I'm going to walk around with or, use. It's this big stuff. That's when those permits come into play. And a lot of your big pyrotechnic guys, they don't carry the small stuff because they're too busy worried about the big shows, and they're
Sure.
not going to. So that's what they're setting up. Um, yeah, it's pretty crazy. Let me circle back on one thing here real quick
Sure.
with on the annual inspections. We talked about that all uh, motor carriers are required to have those. Um, those are annually done every 12 months. And the minimum of 12 months, they're going to have one. For record keeping purposes, for motor carriers out there, you're required to keep that record for 14 months. So once you get a new one, 12 months comes up, I have to go get my truck inspected. Okay, you still got to keep the old one for 14 months. So whenever a DOT enforcement comes in, one of that low hanging fruit in those records they're going to look for is he keeping it for 14 months? Because a lot of times, you new ones come in. Well, you pull the old one, keep the new one. So those are things that I want to throw out there that annually, 12 months, you got to keep the annual inspection. And then, or let me rephrase that, has to be conducted and you have to keep that report for 14 months. That's a
Wow.
big one out there. That's an easy violation when a DOT walks in. Again, if they start seeing one or two things, what else thing? They're going to start looking for more things. And this is that little things. It's like, oh, he's not doing this. What else isn't he doing?
Mm. No pun intended. Where there's smoke, there's fire.
So
That's
right.
basically it.
Yeah,
All of
regardless
this
of what it
stuff.
is.
Looking at the numbers and what's required here, this is not something that you take lightly if you own one of these companies. Um, you need a professional to look at the safety aspect of all of this. Inspections just be one of them. Matt, how do we find you? How do we connect with you if somebody is one of those companies and wants even just to start the conversation?
Yeah, you can reach me at matt@dottrainingsolutions.com. Or you can go to our website at dottrainingsolutions.com. We have a new website now. I'd love for everybody to go see it. Just send us a note in there. You can go to our info line, or you can just send us a message. We'll get back to you. You can also reach me at 573-416-8203.
Cool. Always great talking with you. Got to check out the website. I didn't know that it was new. Saw it when we first got together.
Yep.
So I'll be looking at that, and lots more to talk about. We're just skimming the surface here on a lot of this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But
Lots
always great
to talk about.
always learning something here. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
All right. See you later.
We'll be
Thanks,
right back.
Steve.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.